Thanks for tuning in to the Animal Control Report podcast, where we help debunk the dog catcher stereotype. A lot of times people think it's the dog catcher when they hear about animal control officers, but here on the Animal Control Report, we change that by taking you inside the day-to-day operations of animal control officers. Not only will you hear stories of animal control officers, but you'll hear from industry experts as well. We are also part of the Keep It Humane podcast network. We have some amazing partners there, so check them out at keepithumane.com/podcast network. You can listen to all the animal control and animal welfare related podcasts there. And let's continue to help people help animals. Welcome to the Animal Control Report podcast with your hosts,
Ashley Bishop, OG.
Texas Bishop.
And Texas Bishop. It's the Ashley Bishop and Daniel Ettinger program. We'd like to start by thanking livetrap.com. Check out those Gravity Series Pro traps, those ones that close without having to set the trigger plate. You just open the door and then let the animal step on it. Check those things out. They're awesome. Use discount code Keep It Humane for 10% off of that order. Check that out on your website, livetrap.com. Also check out keepithumane.com, part of the Keep It Humane podcast network. That's keepithumane.com/podcast network. I feel real sleepy here. I don't know what's going on with my brain, but also check out our socials, our Instagram. You can find us at Keep It Humane, or you can find the Animal Control Report. So you can find both of those. I'm really excited about a new product that's coming out soon. So stay tuned. I'm like really excited about, I'm like, to have a animal control self-defense weapon. Is it a weapon? Should I call it a weapon? Self-defense
Tool.
Cool. Yeah, I like that better.
Yeah, a self-defense tool coming your way. It's going to be groundbreaking, so stay tuned for that.
Actually, it's going to be glass breaking, isn't it?
Yeah, it is going to be glass breaking. There you go.
Nice.
Well played. Well played. So check out the website, Keep It Humane, for that. What else? What's going on in the world of bishops?
Utter chaos, but that's a whole, I mean, when isn't it chaos? Isn't that what we all live? Has anybody ever noticed that we can handle a case? Like, you can have a bite case and then have another bite case, and every single one of them is different and has to be handled absolutely differently. Like, there is no continuity between any of our cases. Is it just me? Is it just Wisconsin?
No, it's been insane here, at least for us. It's like every day we're getting like 3 or 4 almost. My officers have been so busy. Everything's been different. We had one case here recently with 5 dogs that attacked owner, and just it's
Yeah. And it's every time like I run across something and they're like, okay, well, talk to the, city attorney. And I call the city attorney and she's like, I have to reread everything because everything is always different. So you got to give me time to figure this out because I can't just pull from previous things we've done.
that's a good
So
thing though. That's a really good thing.
it is, but at the same time, it would be nice if there was like a way that we could actually make it easier for everybody.
Consistency.
Yes.
Is that
And
even a
that's,
thing in
I
our
think,
industry?
I don't think, I mean, there is and there isn't, right? And so that's the million-dollar question is, there's nothing that governs animal control on a unified spectrum. We have different organizations that like make impacts in their own ways, but we don't have like regulatory guidance for our profession, right? I think honestly, with all due respect to those, I think we're like the closest that it comes, and we're just some podcast that randomly talks every week. My point is, we're the most consistent voice, right? Because we have a show and we talk about things every week. Outside of that, like you have newsletters, you have, virtual trainings, you have in-person trainings, but there's just no overall standard governance of what we do. And then you have agencies, organizations with also different, they prioritize our profession differently. So some agencies really value animal welfare, animal services, animal shelters, and others it's just a part of it's part of the organizational chart. That's all it is. It's on there. It lives over here underneath whatever, public safety, public health, or it lives over here under facilities or wherever your department lives, right? They have all these different things. So it just depends really. And that's what's rough. And I think for us on the program, and one of the reasons we started it and have stayed so consistent with it is because we have to try to raise the awareness, not only internally but externally, so people understand why this work is so important. And that's the thing, is like the biggest missing link in my opinion is people don't really understand how much animals impact humans. We understand how much humans impact animals from like animal cruelty or neglect, etc., but I don't think we see it the other way yet, on a national level. And so hopefully one day we can.
Very well said, Dan.
Yeah.
Speaking
There's
of impact,
Go ahead.
hoarding. Today's episode is hoarding, brought to you by Clutterville, America. Do you think there's a Clutterville, America? Somebody Google that. I'm curious.
I feel like there is.
There's got to be a Clutterville, America.
Well, maybe not America, but a Clutterville.
Clutterville, USA. When we talk about hoarding, and a lot of people may or may not know this, that there are, well, first and foremost, I think it's really important to understand hoarding is a mental health disorder that is defined in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, that is the manual used for mental health diagnoses. None of us here on the program are mental health practitioners, though we feel like we may be at times. We do understand that hoarding can be a mental health disorder. Now, again, we can't diagnose officially. Just really quick, has anybody watched the Netflix series Baby Reindeer?
Not yet. My older sister said it was really good.
Yeah, tell her to
Not
give me
even
a
heard
high
of it.
five. What'd you say, Bishop?
Never even heard of it.
Well, you're missing out. So Baby Reindeer is a Netflix miniseries, and this show is not sponsored by Netflix or Baby Reindeer. However, the reason only reason I bring it up is because of the work that we do. We're special. I'm just going to say that we are in any way that you want to define it. But what has happened, the longer you do this job, I think the better reads you get on people, right? Just based on body language, tone, specific words that they use, all those different things, how they dress, how they walk, how they talk, all that. And the instant the character walks into the bar, I already knew, right? Like you already know what their house is going to look like, right? And so when we talk about animal hoarding, there are some giveaways when you're interviewing people and dealing with people. And it was really eye-opening in that aspect, just to kind of see and then see how it all played out. So if you haven't watched it, I'm not going to give away any of the parts, but I recommend checking it out. It's pretty cool if you like psychological type shows. So anyway, is there a Clutterville anywhere?
There's a game called Clutter
Yeah,
5.
I found the game.
Oh, wait, is it a hoarding game?
Kinda.
We need to bring that to the next ACO conference.
It's a where you got to find a bunch of things inside it, like an I Spy.
Okay,
But no city as of yet.
Yeah,
that's lame. I'm going to do some more research. So with hoarding, we break it down. There's 3 different types of hoarders. For animal hoarders, we have your rescuer, we have your overwhelmed caregiver, we have your, what did I say, rescuer, overwhelmed caregiver, and exploiter. And so that's broken down in 3 parts. Now, all can be true for one hoarder, right? They can be a rescuer, they could be an overwhelmed caregiver, and they can be an exploiter all in one. But typically it's one with maybe a little bit of elements of the other. And really, we kind of teased it on our last show when we talked about a woman by the name of LuAnne Strickland, who had a sanctuary rescue out east of Denver, probably about 45 miles. And I don't recall the name of it, but we can get to that when we start reading some of the history. But before we even start, I want to kind of set the tone of who she was. Uh, Rest in peace, but based on her obituary, because it outlined that, and it just gives us some backstory from that aspect, and then we'll jump into kind of the case study, if you will, like the longer. And when I say longer, I'm talking 1983 and she passed in 2018. How many years is that?
A lot. Enough.
Right. So just so you know, it was going on for that long. So I'll read this obituary about LuAnne here. So LuAnne passed away October 1st of
35.
2000. What's that?
35 years.
Okay. So LuAnne passed away on October 1st of 2018 in Denver, surrounded by her dear friends and family after a long illness. She was born Anna LuAnne Peckman on December 19th of 1931 in Wisconsin, of all places. Go ahead. Where is Gillingham, Wisconsin?
No idea.
Well, she graduated from Richard Center High School in 1949. Afterwards, she attended business college and moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, where she worked for the U.S. government. And then she married Ted Strickland of Denver in 1957 and supported his work in the oil industry and his political career in the Colorado state legislature. Now, Ted is also pretty interesting. I'll just pause really quick because he was involved in, he was a director of 2 animal shelters in his time as well, which is kind of interesting in Denver. And there was some pretty bad history with one of the animal shelters called, at the time, it was called the Colorado Humane Society, and it's since disbanded. And actually, the Denver Dumb Friends League, who is really well reputable and does great work, they actually adopted that name, no pun intended. I think they use it maybe for they don't have like animal control, they have like SPCA type of investigators that help out in rural communities. So they're not the same agencies, even though they use the same name. But there was a lot of stuff surrounding the Colorado Humane Society for a while, but we can get into that later. So LuAnne spent her entire life devoted to the care of homeless cats and dogs. In 1989, she moved to a ranch in Strasburg where she cared for hundreds of animals. Her work with animals was constant and tireless, leading to change in Colorado state law regarding how animals were treated. Publicly in the 90s, brought to the public's that's written weird. In the 90s, brought to the public's attention the difference between kill and no kill, and uncovered serious deceptions touted by the kill industry. At LuAnne's urging, the Colorado State Senate President, Ted, her husband, was instrumental in aiding the passage of a law punishing people for animal cruelty. This is true. And champion protection of rodeo stock from abuse, most notably requiring the horns of steers that were being roped to be wrapped for protection. LuAnne herself pioneered innovations for care and keeping of dogs and cats. Her steadfast refusal to keep cats in cages was finally adopted as a standard in the industry, but only after she fought lengthy and difficult battles. At one time, it was said that cats could not be housed communally in a single enclosure, but had to be in individual cages. LuAnne refused. LuAnne was also instrumental in focusing attention on the importance of spaying and neutering pets. Let's go, LuAnne. LuAnne was stubborn, strong-minded, and passionate, and will be mourned and missed by many people who loved her. So I get that. It's absolutely understandable. And the rest is just, the rest about it is just her loved ones and those people that may have preceded her in death. So she was a very passionate, well-known, and well-liked person. And LuAnne had the right idea when it came to wanting to help animals. I think what happened is she became an overwhelmed caregiver and even a rescuer. I think she might have been both. And the only reason I actually know of her outside of some of the articles that have been presented is because I worked in the agency in 2010. I started like my career in Adams County, Colorado, which was the county of where Strasburg was. And I remember I was told specifically, if you get any calls to this address, you are not to respond. And that's
Not
correct. Yeah,
to?
we were not to respond, period. Because of the political implications of Ted being prior, I think at that point he was retired, but he had very strong political ties in Colorado. And there was basically I don't know how you say it, but it was kind of like a hush about that property. And so, unfortunately, we would get complaints because people would rescue an animal from there, or people would somehow get wind of that place, and then they would contact the department because animals were living in horrible conditions. And that was noted several times, not just in some of these cases that we'll look at, but even off the record as far as phone calls to the department. So I distinctly remember knowing about it because we were told, hey, it was kind of like in those movies, like don't go into the enchanted forest, right? And so all you want to do is go into the enchanted forest. So with that,
Which I find interesting because in one of the articles, her husband was quoted saying, treat her no different. Don't
In
go
any way.
easier, don't go more intense, but don't treat her any different than you normally would.
right?
It's
Yeah.
interesting though, if you go through all the articles too, he kind of goes back and forth. It's
Mm,
like he really wants to support her, but then he said that, and then it goes back to I allowed her to do all of this, but she knew at the end of the day that I wasn't going to help, but I would help financially and just kind of be that
yeah.
person, but not boots on the ground type deal. Um, so it was interesting for him to go back and forth and being quoted in different aspects.
And I remember, I really think some of these articles had been scrubbed from the internet. And what I mean is like there's video there was historical video of them going in, I want to say after she died, and like the video was showing them pulling out like just dogs and dogs and dogs from the house. And the way that I found these articles that we're going to go through is
Mm.
I signed. So me and Texas Bishop were talking throughout the week, and you're like, bro, I can only find 2 articles. And I was like, that's weird because years ago, I remember seeing so much about her. And maybe after her passing, somebody had it removed, or maybe when she was getting sick. I'm not sure. But I was so late last night, I was like, nah, there's way more. And so I found all these articles through the public library. I just was able to go out, uh, sign up, make an account, and then um, just get in there and start looking at these articles. And they kind of go cold, what, after 92?
Mhm.
Yeah. But there was some movement, and then again late in the 2000s, and we can talk about that as we go. But let's just go ahead and jump into the first article on the property, and I'll let one of you two just take it away.
So it looks like December 28th in 1983, shelter fire kills 99 cats, and 99 cats are killed. In Denver, animal control officers Saturday removed the carcasses of 99 cats that perished in a fire at a shelter operated by a prominent politician's wife, dubbed the Mother Teresa of cats. LuAnne Strickland, wife of state Senate President Ted Strickland, sat weeping in a car outside the shelter while her husband and her assistant, Betty Schaefer, helped animal control officials remove the cats that died in the Friday fire. Strickland would just take any cat, Schaefer said. I think they were her children.
Hmm. That's a huge statement in the
It
80s,
is.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because we didn't understand hoarding
Mm-mm.
at that point like we do now, right? And so having that, I think they were her children, like, because they didn't, Ted and LuAnne did not have kids, right? And so,
Mm-mm.
yeah,
Do
that,
you know where the shelter was in contrast to their home?
so they lived all around the Denver area. They lived up in, I believe, Westminster for a period of time, which is just north of the city. Um, they're, I'm not sure which shelter they're talking about. I do know that they did operate that Colorado Humane Society for a while, but I'm not. I was trying to find like um, some write up on it, but I couldn't find the specific shelter. So
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it says anywhere because then we jump ahead several years into like why all of this kind of kicked off with the dogs running at large and killing some peacocks, and then people were
let's go.
going,
Yeah, jump in.
all right. So next story is in 1991, in the summer of 1991, and it says Strickland tends pets while wife is in court. And it quotes, I doubt anybody has respect for life that LuAnne does. And it starts off all alone. Ted Strickland cared yesterday for his wife's dogs and cats. Out on the dusty plains, nearly 40 miles from the president's office at the Colorado Senate, Strickland worked while his wife was in court. Asked if he loved animals as much as his wife, Strickland said, of course not. Nobody does. I doubt anybody has the respect for life that LuAnne does. He wore grubby blue jeans, a mud cake shirt, loafers, and a blue cap with the word Continental on it. He spoke just minutes after learning that an Adams County court judge had issued a restraining order preventing authorities from euthanizing many of the hundreds of animals his wife had sheltered. Strickland said yesterday's court ruling certainly vindicates LuAnne's efforts. Growing up, Strickland said his family usually had one cat and one dog. About 12 to 14 years ago, his wife told him she wanted to care for animals on a large scale. Strickland said, I told LuAnne, if you want to do this, I'll support you financially, but I certainly can't spend full time on it. About 6 weeks ago, the state's agriculture commissioner called Strickland and told him someone had complained about his wife's shelter. I told him, don't treat her any differently, no better or worse than anyone else. There were far fewer than reported 600 animals at the shelter Tuesday, when authorities raided it, Strickland said. And he said only 6 cats and 80 to 90 dogs remained there yesterday, contradicting agricultural department's claims that 248 animals remained. Most of the animals at the shelter came from the cities in the metro area, Strickland said. Their owners had decided they no longer wanted them and dumped them off in the country. Every farmer within 50 miles of here will tell you that they get 2 to 3 abandoned animals every year, Strickland said. Most of them are city animals. Strickland admits his wife's public problems could affect him politically. I don't worry about it, he said. I realize a candidate running against me will make this an issue, but I'm certainly not going to duck away from it.
I
And
find
that,
the
yeah.
number difference interesting.
Well, hoarders will do that, right?
Yeah. But to say like the Department of Ag was wrong, there's not 248, like that is a very specific number
Mm.
compared to the 80 to 90, which is, and I've had that. I don't know if you guys have, but I was told, oh yeah, there's like 20 cats in the house, and I get in, I'm like, no, there's at least 60.
Yeah, because
Absolutely. Like, that's
they
very
don't
common.
see, they don't see the massiveness of it all because one cat, what is taking in one more cat or one more dog? But
Right.
early on, it seems like husband is very aloof of the whole situation. It's like he's trying to really weigh his odds of how to publicly say like, well, this wasn't me, it was her, but I support her. I'm still in the political game.
I think that's the biggest part, right? Especially
Yeah.
understanding how that could affect the view of him, right? Understanding that he may have a wife that is keeping animals, but the reality, and I'm not trying to be mean, he's as just as implicit in this crime
Mhm.
as she is. The difference is she might be the main caretaker. She might be the main person, right? That is collecting these animals. You don't go to 200 and plus animals just by collecting one or two a year, unless they're all just not spay and neutered.
What's interesting too that this article takes kind of a weird perspective because later on the same paper publishes another article that now says these animals weren't just county dumped animals. she was getting them specifically from a certain source.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the next one. OC, want to grab that?
Yeah. Same same newspaper, same day published as the previous article. Seized dogs and cats get reprieve. LuAnne Strickland wins agreement delaying plan to destroy sick animals. Hundreds of ailing dogs and cats are spared death yesterday when shelter owner LuAnne Strickland obtained an agreement to postpone a plan to destroy her animals. Now under public scrutiny is the Adams County Animal Shelter, which gave Strickland 2,012 dogs and cats detained for destruction over the past 16 months. Like, that's what, less than a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of animals in a year and a half. According to the state oh wow, Dan.
Pulling to me.
Dan.
She's
Argo,
pulling to me.
I can't even say it. Like, I know the word.
Agriculture?
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Agricultural commissioner. That was ridiculous. Oh, shelter records show Strickland was given as many as 50 pets almost weekly.
Jeez.
On December 12th, 1990, she was given 96 cats and dogs. And if this is just her caring for them, oh my God. All right, sorry. Some Adams County commissioners were stunned, saying that they did not realize the magnitude of Strickland's makeshift animal shelter in Strasburg. But Commissioner Jim Nelms said, I'm not going to tell you I have any trouble with that. I don't. Ooh, all right. As far back as a year ago, Animal Shelter Chief Jack Clancy had recommended to then County Administrator Joe Moore that the shelters stop giving animals to Strickland. I was concerned about the number of animals that LuAnne was getting, he said. She was taking some animals that were ill. But Moore told him to give her all the animals she wanted, Clancy said. He said the animals were better off where they can run than in pens. 2 months ago, after Clancy received complaints from Strickland's neighbors, the commission agreed to deny her any more animals. Yesterday's agreement came 2 days after the state agriculture officials seized nearly 335 dogs and cats from Strickland's home. Her husband, State Senate President Ted Strickland, was at their Strasburg farm yesterday, filling bowls, cleaning cages, and disposing of the excrement of more than 100 animals while his wife was in court. I'd rather be playing golf, he said, but for me not to stand up while her now would be humanely wrong. LuAnne's efforts were commendable. Under the agreement, LuAnne Strickland and the state each will choose a veterinarian. The two veterinarians will select a third member for a panel to decide whether the animals should be killed. The state is trying to prevent the return of the sick animals to Strickland by having them destroyed. We want to see the animals out of their misery, said Jim Miller, the Colorado Department of Agriculture. The state will not file charges against Strickland, he said.
This this is just the tip of the iceberg too, right? And so we think about it in the aspects of like I don't think we understood the way we understand now. And what it looks like to me, and this is just generalizing, I don't have facts here, is LuAnne would take all the animals from shelters locally that were on the euthanasia list because she didn't believe in euthanasia. And that gets back to the whole, and I hate to phrase it this way, but kill versus no kill mentality, right? And I get it. In the 90s, things were definitely different in animal shelters on how they selected euthanasia candidates. But in this article, it specifically says she would often take ill animals, and then she's bringing them into an environment. I mean, it was a farm, right? This wasn't like she had a shelter on her property. She had a farm where she just had pens and pens and pens of animals, and she'd split them up based on size, temperament, etc. And that's the problem, right? Is you have somebody that's untrained and understaffed and under the abilities to provide actual medical care. for hundreds and hundreds of animals. Like, no doubt
Well,
that's going
and
to cause issues.
we all know that the more you stress out an animal, the more you're going to see the effects of those illnesses. So she was not doing them any favor, because if they were already ill in the other shelter, now transporting them, putting them into a new place, putting them with, it sounds like there was no kennels. They were all, pretty much running free, putting
Right.
them with other animals. You're exacerbating the problem.
100%. And then it gets worse, right? Because this is 91. I mean, she did this up until 2018, right? Like that's
And
decades. What's sad and what bothers me from the aspects, the system failed her, because what's sad is more animals actually suffered than
Mhm.
were helped.
Well, and I guess my question is, so that there's talk about, she was taking in 50 animals a day, but they seized nearly or I'm sorry, 50 animals a week, but they seized nearly 335 dogs and cats. So I want to know what's happening. Like, are they just dying there? Is she trying to adopt them out? Is she
Well,
just
she would, yeah. So there was some adoptions taking place. And that's how
okay?
some of the complaints that we got when I worked for that agency, because people would go out to the property and just be like, oh my God, right? Like
Got it.
this is not something that any animal should have to endure.
Okay.
All
It's
right.
it's
Next
also
article.
really it's also really interesting to
Yeah.
see the verbiage that's used in this second article. Like, destroyed and
Yeah.
killed,
Yeah.
and like just very much, where the times we're at, whether I don't know, it was just it's very interesting, and then we look at her obituary and kind of everything that was put in there and kind of how things have changed slightly, but how just tough and rough that this second article is just like, well, she was trying to save all these lives that were going to be killed, they were going to be destroyed. She was trying to do good.
Mm,
Interesting.
yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think when we look at how the industry was in the 90s, right? It wasn't um it just wasn't seen the same way, right? This was not um I don't want to say there wasn't compassion and empathy amongst the group, but there wasn't. Like this wasn't.
It was significantly less.
It is.
Yeah.
My dog's telling me the same thing. Um, it was significantly less. It wasn't seen how it is today, and I think that's the big part of where we're at. All right. Next article by the Rocky Mountain News. This is July 22nd, 91. Veterinarians to decide animals' fate. LuAnne Strickland allowed to keep 220 dogs, cats, as officials decide if conditions at shelters can be improved. I'm going to have this guy, for those of you watching on YouTube and
Nope,
Spotify, he's going to
it's
be my wingman here because he's just all up in my ear today. I don't know what his deal is. Um, you okay, boy? Is this article making man? A team of veterinarians today will begin examining more than 150 dogs and cats seized from LuAnne Strickland's makeshift animal shelter to determine how many will have to be destroyed. The animals were seized last week after officials reportedly finding deplorable conditions at a ranch which housed nearly 600 animals, many sick and undernourished. Strickland was allowed to keep about 220 on the farm while the state and Adams County officials determined whether conditions can be improved. At this point, we're trying to cooperate with Mrs. Strickland while being very concerned about the conditions of the animals that remain. Deputy State Agricultural Commissioner Bob McLevy said yesterday. McLevy said state veterinarians and volunteers from the Denver Dumb Friends League examined the remaining cats and found 45 of them to be ill. The cats, some of which had been living in I don't even know what that word is, Quonset hut. Is that a word?
It is now.
Where the temperatures reached 106 degrees, were placed in individual cages and put in a garage with cooling fans. McLevy said most of the dogs remaining on the ranch were the larger and healthier ones. Last week, Adams County District Judge Harlan Bachman ordered a stay of execution for the confiscated animals until they can be examined by a team of veterinarians comprised of the state's veterinarian. Strickland's personal veterinarian, and a third one chosen by the first two. Now, under public scrutiny, the Adams County Animal Shelter, which over the past 16 months gave Strickland 2,012 dogs and cats that were destined for euthanasia, according to the state agricultural commissioner. Well, there's my theory. State or shelter records show Strickland was given as many as 50 pets almost weekly. On December 12th, she was given 96 cats and dogs. Strickland's wife, Colorado Senate President Strickland, wife of Colorado State Senate President Ted Strickland, had operated the shelter for several years, spending at least $300 a week on dog food alone. During the past month, she said she worked 17 hours a day, feeding and grooming the animals. 17 hours a day. She hired several helpers, but they soon quit, saying the work was too difficult. In 1986, fire ravaged a cat shelter Strickland ran on 50. So this is Denver, 544 East 49th Street, killing more than 100 cats. Less than a year later, she was told to cut the number of cats at another shelter and get them better veterinary care. Officials said she had 207 cats. They found feces on the walls, flies, poor ventilation, and soiled carpet.
Carpeting and
Well,
cats.
considering that hut that you just sent us a picture of, Ashley, the Quonset hut, I
Oh, let me
can't
look.
see how they would have good ventilation. It's essentially like a half of a tin can, like giant half of a tin
Oh,
can.
yeah, that's not even insulated at all. Ugh.
No,
Ugh.
no, and there's no windows or anything, and you're not going to get ventilation in there. Um, I can see where it would reach 106 degrees, no problem.
And can you see how this pulls on the emotional things of people, right? Because on one end, oh, she's taking 1,200 animals from a shelter that was going to euthanize them. But then on the other end, they're being brought to
Worse conditions.
basically hell. And everything that you need to know, and I'm sure, back then, it wasn't like it is now where people are like, I want to help animals, I want to save animals. But I will say that, like, people were hired and then soon quit. Like, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. They're like, there's no effing way that I'm doing this, right? This is disgusting. And she was working 17 hours in a day. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, going back to, the verbiage, and in this particular article, it says deplorable with quotation marks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just what?
Which I don't know why that would be in quotation marks. If there's feces on the wall, that's deplorable. Like, I don't even know why that's a question.
I feel like it's more of a matter of the portrayal of she was trying to help and things got out of hand is where these couple of first articles are going. You know what I mean? Like the sympathy on the I don't want to say the wrong side of the scale, but
But that talks to them, like, as a society, not
yeah,
knowing about the differences of hoarding and the mental health aspect of it, and because that's part of it, right?
correct.
Like, hoarding is just that. Like, they're trying to help. They're trying. Well, one of the um, three aspects of hoarding is that they're trying to do better by these animals and they just can't seem to,
Mm,
or they think they are, but in reality, they're not.
such a good point.
Ugh.
Do you want to hear something? I don't know if it's irony or not, but her first shelter, the shelter she worked at on 544 East 49th Ave in Denver, was, as the crow flies, was like, I don't know, 200 yards from a chicken rendering plant. Just,
Hmm.
yeah, there you go. Fun fact, people.
Hmm.
17 hours a day, bro. Oof.
Well, if she's doing it by herself,
That's all she's doing
yeah.
all day.
Which also makes you wonder, like, what is she actually doing?
Mm.
Well, I find it interesting too that they said grooming the animals.
Mm-hmm.
Eh. I mean, there's nothing in this first article that says anything about medical care, but grooming the animals. What?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. These articles stress me out.
Yes.
Let's keep reading because there's more and there's more.
Yeah. So the next
Do we
part
so do
looks
we
like
want to do the critics one now or should we wait till the end?
maybe wait to the end.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's do
Yeah.
that. All right, so let's go down to some support LuAnne Strickland's pet saving, others don't. While why doesn't Senator Ted Strickland use the publicity over his wife's animal rescue activities to sponsor a mandatory spay neuter law for Colorado? Why should also wait?
We.
Thank you. We should also ban all sales of live animals from pet shops, which would virtually eliminate the importation of puppy mill animals from other states. Any reputable breeder would not fight such laws. It would likely increase sales and hopefully result in more thoughtful owners for animals, since most pet shop sales are impulsive purchases. This is again this is the Denver Post in 1991, people. So we're this was written. Does it show them who this was written by back then? No.
Mm-mm.
But let me just say, 1991, they basically said, why are we not sponsoring a mandatory spay and neuter law? Love that. I absolutely love that. I know people are against that. I don't care. I love that in 1991. And then talking about getting rid of puppy
Puppy
mill.
shops, yeah, your pet lands and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, they're so
exactly.
far ahead of it here that I saw that too, and I was like, wow, where would we be if all of this was initiated back in the 90s?
That's
Where would we
over
be now?
30 years ago.
Yeah, it's insane.
Insane. All right, who's next?
Okay, I'll go. Next one is again from Rocky Mountain News, and this time we're in August of 1991. It says LuAnne Strickland charge in pet case. Adams County prosecutors yesterday charged LuAnne Strickland with 3 misdemeanor counts of cruelty to animals. The charges came after officials found about 600 animals last month at her home in eastern Adams County, some sick and dying. The whole thing is stupid, Strickland said yesterday. I have never committed a criminal act or an act of cruelty in my life. She is charged with mistreating and neglecting 11 dogs and cats and keeping more than 100 cats inside a Quonset hut she used as a cat shelter, according to court documents. Each of the charges carries a maximum penalty of 2 years in jail and a $5,000 fine. The charges came nearly a month after Strickland's Strasburg home was raided July 16th by the Sheriff's Department and the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Hundreds of cats and dogs were seized from the shelter. Strickland got the animals from Adams County animal shelters so that they wouldn't be put to death. Strickland sought to stop the state from killing her animals and was able to obtain an agreement in which 3 veterinarians would examine the animals to determine which ones should die. 11 cats and 1 dog were killed last month, said John Mulsby, field veterinarian for the Agricultural Department. The veterinarian examination served as a basis for the charges, said Bob Neiman of Adams County Sheriff's Department. It was their determination that some of these animals had been mistreated, he said. Yesterday, Strickland's attorney, Kay Clements, decried the charges. The filing of the charges was politically motivated, she said. It was to cover up the activities, the raid, and the seizure of pets that were not authorized. Strickland will be issued a summons to appear September 10th in Adams County Court on cruelty charges.
Okay, this quote, the whole thing is stupid. What is that telling you, right? Like she is literally in complete denial and thinks that one person can take care of 600 animals. I can barely take care of 1 dog.
And yourself.
Fair.
Yeah, it very much puts which what is exactly what we see in all the cases that we see and are dealing with now. It's just, complete denial of where they live in and what they're living in and what the issues are and, just taking on more and more and not realizing that they cannot handle it and they're just doing the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wonder, what the conversation was like. Did the three veterinarians look at the animals together at the same time and like talk about what they were seeing, or did they do it independently?
Mm.
Good
Um,
question.
I feel like that could make a huge difference. I'd like to think that at least the state veterinarian, I'm just very, very surprised that there was only 11 animals out of the 600 that they euthanized, and then she only got three misdemeanor charges.
And also, why were the two veterinarians allowed to pick the third?
Yeah,
Because they didn't
yeah,
know what they were doing. And I think when I say that, like, I just think that what I mean by that is like the state or the county this was new territory for them,
Mhm.
right? This wasn't something that has probably popped up before on this magnitude. Again, and we look at it from the side of like it's emotion. So, oh, she's doing the right thing or she's trying to do the right thing. We should give her the benefit of the doubt. OG
yeah.
Bishop, take this one.
All right. LuAnne Strickland weeps over animal videos. Some dogs and cats have been killed. So it's very emotional. This is from August 15th of 91 from the Rocky Mountain News. LuAnne Strickland wept as she watched videotapes that investigators showed in court Wednesday depicting sick dogs and cats she kept at her Strasbourg farm. We're seeing animals that she was very partial to, in which she no longer has, said Kay Clements, Strickland's attorney. Some of them have been killed, so it's very emotional for her. The videotapes were part of the evidence presented in a hearing at Adams County District Court to determine if she should have custody of 326 dogs and cats, which were seized in a raid July 16th by the state agricultural department and Adams County Sheriff's deputies. Authorities had taken the animals after they had found deplorable conditions at her Strasbourg home, where many of her 600 cats and dogs were sick or dying. A dozen of her pets were killed last month after a panel of three veterinarians examined them. Clemens said she was told by authorities that the state will ask to be reimbursed $10 a day per animal to care for the remaining cats and dogs that were seized. In the courtroom Wednesday, Strickland sobbed and leaned against Clements as Susan McMyer from the Attorney General's office asked a state veterinarian about the conditions of an aging dog depicted in the video on the video monitor. This is an older dog that excuse me, that Miss Strickland on May 17th said would be euthanized, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, said John Mulsbury, field veterinarian for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. He said about 50% of the cats he saw had high temperatures and suffered from various ailments, including tapeworm and leukemia. During a court recess, Hal Shover, chairman of the Adams County Republican Party, said that if Strickland was guilty of abusing and neglecting her pets, quote, the Pope is a member of the KKK.
Wow.
Ouch.
And that, like, either we're at a stage in just animal welfare in the 90s where people just don't get it and don't see that letting animals suffer is abuse.
Right. But okay, so here's to my point. I guess so 11 animals were euthanized, not that 11 animals were found neglected. Um, so I guess that makes a little bit more sense now, but 50% of the cats he saw had high temperatures.
So that means
So
yeah,
like
Numbers don't add up.
like why is there only 3 misdemeanors?
right, right.
Um, various ailments including tapeworm. Okay. And leukemia. I will say this about the leukemia. Back in the 90s, there was not a cure for leukemia like there is now. And so that was, you just kind of let the animals live out their life until it was time to euthanize. But it also states that she wasn't capable of doing that when the animal needed to be euthanized. Um, Tapeworm is completely treatable, so that shouldn't have been an issue. She should have been able to prove that she was treating that. And where is the documentation that she is having a veterinarian come in and look at any of these animals?
Right.
Like, you should have either a vet on staff or somebody that regularly is coming in. And, you know, if they're coming in and either not doing anything, or why aren't they on the hook too?
Yeah, that's it just it's unreal in the aspects of like we're living in almost like this imaginary world where we're writing this script on how horrible it can be. And the irony of it all, and I think it was talked about in the obituary that her husband helped champion the animal cruelty law in Colorado.
Yeah.
And here in turn, his wife is now facing violations of that same law. Like you almost can't make that up.
Were they together until the day she died?
He died. He passed first. Yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
they were married the entire time? They were never divorced?
Correct.
Okay. So it
So
wasn't a
Dan,
play for him?
Dan, do you know of what happened after I mean, by the time you got to where you were at in Colorado when you heard about all this, what happened to the property and all the animals?
I mean, they were still there in when I started with Adams County in 2010. The animals were still there at the property, and that's why we were told not to go there. They were not, and I remember this video, and I kind of want to message my friend who works for Fox News in Denver and see if they have anything on the DL, because somebody scrubbed this stuff from the internet. Like this is all gone, which is who did it? Maybe we'll find out by putting this episode out, to be honest. Maybe we'll get a cease and desist letter. I don't know. But I'll be honest, like from the aspects of there, like I remember seeing video footage. I remember texting my old boss, in fact, like the video clip that was on social media. Um, and just like being like, wow, they finally got all of her animals. But unfortunately, it was after she passed away, and they were allowed to live in that filth for decades. And so then the state finally took possession of them, and I'm guessing they just distributed them if they were adoptable to local shelters and rescues.
It's interesting because I didn't even think to do this, but like right now I just typed in as well. Like if society thought that this was okay even back then,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing, there's no foundation or anything in her name. Like I just looked it up. I can't see anything or find anything. Maybe it's under her husband's name. Maybe I need to look that up.
It's the Mandela effect.
It's so interesting, if she was doing the good work that everybody says that she was doing, then why aren't we setting up foundations and
So if I'm not
ways
mistaken, this adopt a shelter pet license plate
uh-huh
was created by the Colorado Pet Overpopulation Fund.
uh-huh
And I'm pretty sure that's what I'm talking about. There were articles about her, and I'm pretty sure she helped start or didn't, maybe even herself started the Colorado Pet Overpopulation Fund, but it's all gone.
yeah, like there's nothing anywhere.
It's wild.
Mm.
It is wild. All right, let's read this next article because it's fascinating.
uh
LuAnne
let's
Strickland regains custody of animals. Judge rules that although dogs, cats were neglected, she was trying to help them. August 20th, 1991, Rocky Mountain News. LuAnne Strickland wept Monday as Adams County District Judge said that while Strickland neglected animals in her care, she was only trying to help them. Strickland was awarded custody of the animals, provided she gets assistance from others. But before animals are released, the court will decide whether Strickland must pay the estimated $100,000 it cost the state to board the animals, or the cost of the state to board the animals, excuse me. Strickland wept again after Judge Harlan Bachman's ruling as she was congratulated and hugged by her supporters. "I'm so happy that I can't stand it," she said. More than 300 dogs and cats were seized July 16th from her Strasburg farm by the Colorado Department of Ag and Adams County Sheriff's Office deputies after officials found many animals sick and dying. Monday, Colorado State Senate President Ted Strickland testified that in the past 2 years, he paid more than $23,000 in veterinary bills, electricity and heating costs, and for water well replacement for the animals in his wife's care. I know the animals were well fed, well watered, well cared for, and medicated, he said. After listening to testimony of veterinarians who examined Strickland's animals, Brockman ruled that the animals had been neglected. But he said the neglect was a result of LuAnne Strickland's inability to recognize she needed help to care for the animals. But if volunteer help and veterinary assistance are not forthcoming, then the Colorado Department of Ag could file in court to stop her actions. She still faces 3 misdemeanor counts of animal cruelty in Colorado. I just messed that whole sentence up, but it's fine. Strickland said she had 3 paid employees, 9 volunteers, 2 veterinarians who will help her. The Department of Agriculture spokesman said he was pleased by the ruling.
It sucks because we'd all know that we've all had that one court case where the judge was like, well, they were trying to help.
Yeah.
$23,000 in veterinary bills.
And back in 91, you could buy houses for $23,000.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's a lot of money. It's a lot
But
of
it's
money.
also what he's saying, right? Like this isn't, that's not coming from documentation. It's coming from his statement.
True.
To OG Bishop's point too, I feel like the investigation itself is almost kind of all over the place. And obviously we're way now how we do things, I'm sure. But I feel either it's being portrayed like, okay, they just went in guns a-blazing because, they could and they didn't have anything, pertinent to say that they could be out there. I don't know. I just feel like everything's all over the place. Like what are the who's, what, when's, where's, and why's? I feel they're not being answered by any of these documents.
Yeah.
Or stories that are being written about the case. And I don't know if it's because of who it is, and maybe that's why it's kind of obviously why it's written the way it is.
I mean, there's definitely, I mean, if we think about it from the aspects of just our research alone, and all of us are investigators and do research, like it's clear that from the moment this started, there was political influence behind some of the rulings. And what's crazy about it is as we go through and we're trying to get all this information, at some point in life, LuAnne or people that helped LuAnne realized that there was a lot of negative information on her on the internet. And then, I mean, you can pay to have your stuff wiped. Like I know people have done that. Like it is very clear to me that that's what happened. Like I clearly remember that, like reading about she started CPOF, like that was her idea, which is great. Like create a fund that we can then award to shelters to help spay and neuter pets. So she did good work, but where did it all go? Like where are all these articles? Right? That's what blows my mind.
Have either of you, outside of this one, Dan, actually ever had to investigate somebody of some kind of political power or somebody maybe within like a sister agency or something that would have been a difficult case because of, you know, it being a conflict of interest or that they may have some kind of power over you?
Yeah. In fact, in our own department, we tried to hide the fact that, and maybe we'll talk about this at some point. Why not? I'm putting it out there now. There's no need to hide from it. We had a supervisor at the time leave cats in an animal control officer vehicle for 7 days, and our department wanted to basically handle it internally, though it's a criminal matter. And myself, I went to the DA's office with all the evidence that we had, and we were able to file charges. Now, that individual took a no contest. And so if they do, basically, if they do everything during their probation period, it gets wiped from their record, which, okay, that's fine, but they're still like, we were held to a standard, and you left cats in a vehicle for 7 days. They lived. I mean, they lived, both of them. Thankfully, it wasn't super hot out. But they were, malnourished, living in their own feces, dehydrated, etc. Like that is the definition of negligence, and one of our own staff members. And it was difficult because I was not in a supervisory position at that time, and I wasn't motivated by anything other than integrity to what we do in a profession. So you can't sit here and be tasked to help animals and then leave them in a vehicle and then think that you can get away with it or not prosecute it. And I remember this, the director, I remember talking to her about it before I decided to go to the DA's office. And it was real short. It was like, well, we talked to the city attorney, and they don't want to move forward with any charges because they think it's better to handle internally. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, the evidence shows that he willfully left these animals in a vehicle.
Right.
What are we doing?
I had one that unfortunately never got to be seen through. I never got to bring my charges forward because it was a lack of amount of time. I had a lot of evidence to go through, and unfortunately, it was a husband and wife duo, and one of them worked for a sister agency, and the other one was very, very well known in the community, seen as a go-to person for animal related, dog related things. Um, and so I was told I had to get just a little bit more evidence. And so I never got to make those charges because I was not allowed the time to work the case
Wow.
being by myself. And so my report sits out there. Um, but and now I don't work for that jurisdiction anymore, so I guarantee nothing will ever come of it. But yeah, it's frustrating when you're up against somebody in a position above you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, luckily for me, at least now, as I haven't had anything of this magnitude or anything very pressing. But at shelters I've worked for before, I saw it happen and watched it happen in certain cases. So most definitely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
better knock on some wood.
That's what I have a good supervisor for. But yeah, I've been lucky enough. But yeah, I can remember very clearly, like when I first started in the industry, just as a little part-timer, hearing about a certain case with somebody who's in power, and it didn't go anywhere. There's actually two cases. I had a dog with a lawnmower kind of
Oh,
issue. Yeah,
Mm.
that didn't go anywhere, unfortunately, because of somebody knew somebody. But yeah, I do remember that.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think this is the last article we have for this one. Who wants to take it away?
Which
I lost where we were. I scrolled down.
same.
It's
Oh,
LuAnne
I got
Strickland.
it.
Yeah.
I got it. LuAnne Strickland billed $64,000 for care of animals. Rocky Mountain News, August 22nd, 1991. The Colorado Department of Agriculture on Wednesday billed LuAnne Strickland more than $64,000 to cover the cost of boarding and caring for about 300 cats and dogs the agency confiscated from her last month. Strickland's attorney, Kay Clements, has until Friday to challenge the bill, but it must be paid within 10 days. Ouch. If it's not, the state will have the right to dispose of the animals as it wishes, including euthanasia. However, Jim Miller, spokesman for the Agriculture Department, said his office would try aggressive adoption first. The first bill does not include nearly $40,000 in legal fees, $10,310.17 in Agriculture and Colorado Division of Wildlife staff time, or $1,857 in costs incurred by the Denver Dumb Friends League in caring for the animals. I can't get over that name. Miller said those expenses were paid or being paid by taxpayers. That's a lot of money. The Agriculture Department seized more than 300 animals from Strickland's Strasburg farm on July 16th after officials found many of the animals were sick or dying. On Monday, an Adams County district judge found Strickland had neglected her animals, but awarded her custody of them provided she got help to take care of them. In accordance with the state law, Strickland is liable for the cost incurred by the state for the animal's care. Fees will be charged for the 299 animals being held in several shelters at a total cost of $1,500 to $2,100 a day.
Also, I thought that was the last article, and then I opened the document, and there's way
No.
more.
Yeah, there's not like this
was
is a
gonna say.
whole nother episode.
Yeah.
We'll break it in two. We'll break it in two episodes because this is a lot, but it is unreal to think that. How long did she have to pay the 64,000?
$10 or 10 days.
Wow.
10 days.
And let's be real,
Which-
guys. How often do we get any of that ever?
Back to
Oh.
like the shelter and stuff.
Yeah. Like,
Never.
like never. All the time that the staff puts in to care for animals that are going through it, and it's just never.
Although I did have one person who we ended up holding her animals for like 2 months. It was 2 dogs for 2 months, and it was like a $5,000 bill. She did pay it all off.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that's probably the only one I've ever had paid off.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I think we need to like revisit this episode and finish this out.
Yeah, it's clear that it's going to take us another hour, and we're not trying to hoard your time, people. However, we'll stop here, and please come back for the next episode, part 2 of the LuAnne Strickland hoarding case study. Because if you think about it, there's still more research that we can do on our end to see if we can uncover some of this stuff. As I mentioned, if you do your Google search and you put in
There's nothing.
LuAnne Strickland, common spelling, Strickland, it's just there's 2 articles. There's 3 articles. There's
Yeah.
like one from the Westward in Denver. There's her obituary, and then there's like one more. And it's fascinating that this stuff has gone just cold. So please
Well,
keep an eye out for part 2 of the LuAnne Strickland hoarding series.
Because it gets more interesting, I have to say. The articles that are coming up that we have not gone over kind of takes a turn for a different
It
reason.
really does. Like, you think you've seen some of this, and now it's like, OMG. Cool.
you know, I wonder if after her husband died, she probably had a ton of money. So she probably scrubbed the internet herself, paid
Yeah.
somebody to scrub it.
Yeah, I would imagine that somebody in her camp or like you said, herself. I would have loved, and that's what's sad is like when I was told not to go to that property, Now, I was a brand new baby ACO at that time, so who knows what like my conversations would have been. But the current me now, I would have loved to have like an hour with her just to chat, just to understand her as a person. And as I would assume with hoarders in general, there's this like it's a typical personality. There's not, and not that people aren't variations of people, but like I'm sure she would have been similar to a lot of hoarders that I've dealt with from the
Mhm.
mentality point of it, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. Well, I appreciate this extra long episode and for you taking the time out this morning. We kind of went over our normal episode length, but appreciate those that listen. Stay tuned for part two. That'll be coming up around. You know what? We're just gonna tease it, so you're gonna have to just keep checking back. Next week we have different guests, so but we'll get part two out there soon, so you won't want to miss that. And check out our website again, keepithumane.com/podcast network for all the podcasts that are part of that. And don't forget to like, share, rate the podcast. And as Bishop likes to say,
Helping people.
help people help
Whatever.
animals.
No, but we're helping people help animals.
No, that's somebody else is using that phrase, helping. We use help people help animals.
Oh,
They use help
yeah.
people help pets, which is great too. Shout out to Haas, but we help people help animals and
Okay.
keep it humane.